He was a lone canine living on the streets, barely getting by each day, until the stray risked everything one terrifying night when a police officer's life was on the line. He hardly understood what would happen, but saving a human will go against everything that. What a stray dog may achieve in a busy city's peaceful suburb street, lighting create faint pools of light along. Here, amid drifting streets, were shuttered shops and deserted sidewalks. Nighttime bones evident behind his threadbare fur, garbage, and the distant buzz of traffic that a lone stray dog wandered. Seldom gave the mud a second look, dismissing it as merely another tattered feature of the urban Cayenne. A resolute spirit, molded by innumerable struggles for scraps and the goring anguish of survival, lay behind those cautious eyes. An experienced member of the local police force, Officer James Delgado, conducted his late-night patrol around town. Known for his diligence and cool head, Delgado took great satisfaction in protecting the neighborhood where the stray dog lived. As he walked, he witnessed his fair share of traffic accidents, robberies, and emergencies, even physical altercations, and thought he had been ready for anything. But during one crucial shift, Delgado found himself confronted with a grave danger he never anticipated, one that would put his preparation and fortitude to the test. The sequence of events started when Delgado answered a mysterious 911 call about questionable conduct. The lone policeman entered a silent area close to an abandoned warehouse as darkness shrouded the empty lot. The stray dog hid in the shadows created by movement flickers, creating an arena of possible danger at the same time. A tension crackled in the stuffy air as Delgado stepped farther inside the deserted structure, an invisible presence observing. Waiting, the altercation quickly erupted, trapping the armed. Officer Delgado was cornered and overwhelmed by his attackers as adrenaline filled his bloodstream. He recognized that the backup was too far away to reach him in time, yet an unlikely savior appeared on the outskirts of this developing disaster, an ordinary stray whose intuition and everyone concerned would soon be amazed by the courage that drives an animal to shun, by society and fighting for food to step in and help a person in need. And how would Officer Delgado respond to this impossibility if he were shut off from assistance? Responses from Alliance show a connection derived not from training or domestication, but little did either realize that a hidden empathy that can develop between humans and animals in the most dire circumstances. One impetuous act of bravery would change their fates and the way in. The community as a whole saw a stray dog as someone who would always be forgotten under. The city's nightscape became a maze of subdued hues and long streets due to the dim glare of street lights. A man with a moderate build and kind eyes, Shadow's Officer James Delgado, handled this world with serene watchfulness, having spent almost 10 years working these streets and developing a close relationship with the locals. Businesses were aware of his amiable wave, and children playing on stoops were able to detect his comforting smile. But he also understood the secret areas of this neighborhood, where darkness cloaked desperation, as dark as midnight, and evil raged unseen. During a regular shift, Delgado was contacted by dispatch regarding a potential break-in at an abandoned. He probably set off a false alarm at the warehouse next to the industrial zone, but he drove there methodically, as usual. The clang of distant metal and the strong odor of long-discarded machinery identified the lonely location. Delgado parked his patrol car beneath a flickering lamp and then emerged into the quiet, scrutinizing the lines of people getting on their way. Windows and corroded freight docks nearby. A ragged stray dog wandered around looking for. Of scraps, he lacked a name, a collar, and a coat that was mostly matted with dirt. He had learned to live on the fringes, so he was either ignored or shot away. Tonight, his keen nose brought him to searching the perimeter of the facility for an unprotected garbage, can, or leftover food. He was hungry, yet every action was marked with caution since he had been pushed away too many times to be trusted. The stray picked up a new scent as he sniffed around a chain-link fence. His ears perked up at the little tinge of fear or hostility in the air. Hearing faint noises like footsteps, fabric shuffles, and muffled conversations, followed by a louder sound that sounded like scuffle. The dog hesitated inside the building, its tail dropped, conflicted between impulses for survival, urging him to leave and a strange interest in what was within Delgado. Discovered a jar at the main entrance with a padlock cut cleanly, sharpening his breath. The radio dispatch was activated by adrenaline, confirming standby for a potential break-in, but the static laced. The response included a warning that the backup was out for at least 15 minutes because other units were tied up, and Delgado felt knotted. Shape in his belly, he slithered across the dimly lit corridor, piercing the shadows as the corrugated metal walls loomed. And there was a quick burst of movement, and the area smelled of dust and stale oil. He found the Delgard pulse-quickened cops behind a tall stack of crates. As he moved forward, there was silence, but then two individuals lunged from behind, causing commotion. Delgado was able to sidestep the crates, one of whom was holding what looked to be a handgun and the other a crowbar. Heart beating, but the men unexpectedly moved in and delivered a strike with a crowbar. Delgado saw a third assailant in the flickering dance of lantern beams, just missing his shoulder. Delgado understood he had to back off or take cover after being cut off and outnumbered while lurking to his right. His attempts to radio for assistance were unsuccessful until he stepped back and felt cold metal on his back and a door that was sealed shut. Suppressed by a stern order to drop it or we shoot, Delgado's thoughts advised him to find a time to disarm them or negotiate a stall, but he saw no obvious. As muffled, ancient yells reverberated through broken windows, the stray dog's advantage outdoors made his ears twitch with curiosity and his innate sense of conflict pulled him to a crouched spot in the fence. Sneakily navigating across trash-strewn concrete, he slipped beneath a bent length of chain link. One glimpse of movement through a broken window indicated that people were inside, possibly in distress. Otherwise, he might have run. Humans rarely valued his presence at the first hint of conflict, yet something inside him drove him forward. The man with the gun yelled at Delgado to empty his holster as he battled to keep his cool in the warehouse. Delgado's shoulder was smacked by another, and the officer's flashlight clattered on the ground as the crowd bar grabbed his radio. Floor rolling until its beam briefly touched a pool of Delgado's breath in the distance that arrived quickly, and he could detect the tang of panic in his perspiration. This was not. These men, who were suspected of routine burglaries, showed trained unity, probably in anticipation of intercepting an officer, and disappear before reinforcements could reach them. Then they noticed a little, covert rustle close to a side window. Delgado grabbed the opportunity and attempted to pivot when the gunman whipped around a stress spike in his posture. A spike of pain went through him as the crowbar-wielding hissed a curse and knocked him forcefully against a stack of crates. Delgado saw a figure near the window as his adrenaline surged in his shoulder. His mind hardly had time to grasp the idea that the shape was too low to be a standing human before the stray dog caused mayhem once more. Cringed at the mechanical clank as he slipped through a gap, his gaze darting between Delgado's immobilized form and the cop was cornered and in danger due to the hostile postures of the men, but the dog had. Untrained in human defense, the officer's powerlessness sparked his own fierce survival spirit. Recalling instances in which he had been similarly trapped, kicked, or struck by people stoked his thirst for empathy and an impulse to assist with a guttural snarl was triggered by panic, and the stray lunged. Startled, the gunman yanked the handgun away from Delgado to aim at the dog, which then charged into the man's. Leg's teeth bead shot ricocheted against a metal beam and went wild. Delgado took advantage of the distraction and pushed the crowbar away, claiming the second was silent, swore, and staggered back while the dog's powerful momentum knocked the gunman down, who yelled in surprise. Delgado's heart thumping took advantage of the misunderstanding by grabbing his sidearm from. The cops were surprised by the dog's involvement, and the person with the crowbar was yelling at them to down their firearms. When the gunman hesitated, frantic canine jaws snapped close on his forearm, pinning him. Attempted to break free, Delgado reclaimed his position and yelled, "Don't." The men knew they had lost control as they moved in the wavering flashlight beam. While one man hurled a crowbar, the other writhed in the dog's snarling rage. Delgado's shoulder ache was eliminated with advanced adrenaline, which he pressed. A tense confrontation ensued, with the officer gasping when he put his gun forward to ensure compliance. Two crooks were disarmed with effort, and the third, pinned beneath a stray dog, murmured threats and curses every second. Seemed like a thread hanging in midair, ready to break if the dog reacted too strongly or the men struck out once more. But the gunman was pinned by Stray, unwavering, without administering a deadly bite. Then, in a shriek of sirens, it seemed as if the dog, in his instincts, recognized Delgado's presence behind him. When the outside backup arrived, officers rushed into the warehouse with their rifles poised. Only once the crooks were subdued did the Stray let go of his grip, panting his ears. The men were cuffed, spluttering and shouting, and they flicked back when Delgado placed a comforting touch on his tattered side. Delgado was assisted to his feet by another cop with wide eyes, who led him outside to examine the bruises. The Stray walked with his tail down, perhaps unsure of whether Delgado sunk against his police car, breathless, in the glaring light of the headlights, wondering if he would be welcomed or punished. When a second police officer inquired about his well-being, Delgado gave a rigid nod. His gaze straying to the dog holding a bruised arm, lured the Stray closer, and the dog cautiously approached, quivering from the adrenaline and violence surge in. Officer Delgado laid a soft palm on the dog's head in front of the gathered cops. His voice was husky with relief. "You saved my," he said, "life." There was silence among the uniforms. Few had ever seen a Stray intercede so forcefully during an armed confrontation that a link was formed that Delgado usually avoided. Felt a wave of gratitude for the dog, who had formerly only been a hungry shadow in the alley, had put everything on the line to keep him safe, and now, with police lights flashing red and blue, the idea of just as. Every officer who saw the dog's tired eyes felt a wave of wonder at how a creature could be so terribly inadequate. Ambulances arrived after someone who was rejected by society showed bravery that defied reason. After paramedics examined Delgado's wounds, the offenders were taken away while yelling obscenities, but the dog never veered away from the cop, observing, as if to make sure he wouldn't get any more injuries. Delgado swallowed a rush of emotion, caressed the dog's ears softly, and said, "Thank you," as the rain began to patter on the roof, making the grim aura of the warehouse. But neither man nor dog left their silent conversation. When dawn threatened the sky's edge, Delgado and his peculiar savior discovered themselves constrained by a single impetuous act of bravery. Neither recognized the whole effect, but how this interaction would reverberate throughout the neighborhood and Delgado's personal life. They stood on the brink of a post-conflict relief area, bathed in the raw brilliance of a fresh chapter for an officer and a starved Stray who formerly wandered aimlessly, who had never anticipated being rescued from the outskirts of the city. Fate had brought them together in a time that presented all presumptions regarding fear, loyalty, and the unexpected ways that a life can be saved. Officer James Delgado suffered bruises and a painful shoulder from the crowbar strikes during the warehouse incident. But his anguish was overshadowed by a wave of appreciation after hearing about a stray dog saving a cornered police officer. Over the precinct and beyond, even in a city where heroic tales are common, this, an unidentified, unloved street warning animal with a unique edge committed in. As rescue personnel gathered and dawn broke over the rusted rooftops, Delgado recognized he was acting in a way that most people would never predict. Didn't want to leave the dog at the crime scene. Therefore, they couldn't just leave it on the same hungry streets. Seeing, the dog trembled from the residual energy as Delgado enticed it into his squad cruiser. Shock permitted the soft shove, and Delgado's eyes darted tensely at the metal and antiseptic odor. A few co-workers who had heard the scanner made their way slowly to the police station, their minds still spinning after the events of the night. As they watched Delgado leave with the Stray, they were filled with curiosity and discussion. Delgado put his jacket over a bench in the station's break room while wearing heels, and gave the dog a dish of water. A few cops stopped talking in the middle of the conversation to watch, raising their eyebrows at one elder. "You bring a Stray in to book Delgado." The sergeant laughed, but Delgado's earnest description of the dog's part in disarming a shooter put an end to any jokes, and only whispers of disbelief or that one unique dog could break the silence. Despite investigating every nook and cranny, the dog's ears remained alert, twitching at every phone ring or coffee mug clang. When it came to missing or stray animals, the department's typical procedure was to call Animal Control, or A. Shelter Delgado requested an exemption, and he persisted in saving my life. The steadfast watch commander, Captain Reyes, a fair and pragmatic woman, examined the malnourished dog. With a mixture of respect and prudence, "Delgado, you can't keep it here forever. Take him to the station's garage area for the time being," she said politely. Delgado nodded with relief as the following several days passed. "We'll check on him and see sure he's okay before deciding on the next course of action." The dog spent hours soaking up fresh water while resting in a peaceful area of the station's little garage. An officer supplied a bag of dogs at a co-worker who periodically worked in nearby. Shelter dropped off. Nevertheless, the dog's tail trembled every time Delgado checked on him, like a creature caught between a growing sense of trust in this uniformed man and a terror of unfamiliar surroundings. Speaking softly, Delgado's injuries required a thorough examination before midday, so he went to the medical center at the station, where a medic attended to his bruises and advised him to relax, fatherly watch. Delgado was concerned about what would happen when the commander suggested that he take a day off and get some actual sleep. What would happen to the dog if he just went home? After a brief internal argument, he called, describing the unique situation, the volunteer at the neighborhood animal shelter on the other. Endowed by his tail, I volunteered to perform a brief, cost-free veterinary examination. However, Delgado pondered whether the dog would disappear from the system or be dismissed as just another stray. The canine's bravery. In a silent silence, Delgado considered a lunge and decided that, sir. To his own surprise, he chose to temporarily foster the dog in his little apartment until he could determine whether it. When he told Captain Reyes, it was either available for adoption or had an owner looking for it. "Are you sure you can handle a dog, Delgado?" "They're a big responsibility," she said with a rare half-smile. He nodded, remembering. The constant expression in the dog's eyes as it protected him from harm was a mixture of debt and sincere love. Delgado said, "I owe him at least a safe place to recover after watching out for me." Consequently, Delgado cautiously carried the dog in his own vehicle in the early evening, settling in the back seat, looking around, and avoiding sudden movements that could shock the dog, who was still a little tense. Driving across the metropolis felt unreal as the lights flickered by. Delgado was now more than just an officer on duty. He was a caregiver guiding a wounded outlaw into an uncertain future. After verifying with his landlord, Delgado hastened the puppy because Minal fussed and the little housing complex allowed dogs. Staircase, luring it down the little corridor into the simple living room of the apartment. The dog smelled the. Delgado offered a bowl of fresh water and some leftover chicken from his refrigerator while the furniture paced in circles. The dog ate it because it was hungry, then gave Delgado a wary glance as though he expected to be reprimanded. But instead he knelt. With a gentle pat on the dog's back, he whispered, "I'm grateful and amazed that you saved my life out there." I can't help but notice the tension in the air when the dog's ears and tail brushed the floor. His stance relaxed as though he recognized the security of these walls and was adapting to. Delgado recognized that the dog probably had never explored the inside of a house before recoiling at each other's patience. For the first several evenings, the dog slept fitfully on a phone or the hum of the refrigerator. He whimpered slightly any time Delgado left the room, as if he was afraid of the worn pillow that was dragged in from storage. Concerned about abandonment once more, Delgado scheduled a visit with the local rescue's veterinarian partner, concentrating on examining the warehouse fight for any hidden problems, parasites, or injuries. He is a survivor, and the veterinarian's examination showed just little malnourishment and no serious injuries other than scrapes from the night sword. Said, caressing the dog's head as the precinct was filled with words. Reactions to the stray that saved Delgado range from encouraging teasing to. Some gave training advice, while others made fun of the dog's deservingness of a medal, and even the local media took notice of this unusual tale of a police officer. Rescued by a stray and now being raised at home, Delgado, a private individual, attempted to maintain. Details are limited because he knows that being in the spotlight could make things more difficult, but a glimmer of pride accompanied his typical When someone inquired about the dog's welfare one late evening after supper, Delgado slipped into. With a tired sigh, the dog walked over to the couch and rested its muzzle on Delgado's leg, softly patting its ragged. Thoughts had swirled in Delgado's ears as he closed his eyes. Just days ago, this dog was A. Now, fate had turned the specter in the night into just another ravenous ghost on the city streets. Tied them together, thinking about how the dog had no justification for stepping in that fatal night without any bond or training, but had decided to put its life at danger for him. A rush of thankfulness almost made him cry. "I won't let you down, friend." Across from them, he said, the street lamp outside flickered, causing shifting. Darkness. Delgado felt the shadows through the thin drapes of the apartment, beginning of a voyage that neither he nor the dog could have foreseen. Delgado's patience would be put to the test if he were to teach the dog basic home rules and include them into his daily routine. Dog's capacity for trust. But every time Delgado remembered the sound of that gunshot bouncing off the walls of the warehouse, he recalled a ragged dog boldly jumping in harm's way, and that memory maintained his determination despite the unexpected and difficult circumstances in which this stray dog had entered his life. A few days after sharing his pledge to defend the city, Delgado planned to uphold it as completely as he had previously. James Delgado, who lived in the apartment with the rescued stray, couldn't dispute how fast they became friends. The dog is still unnamed. Followed Delgado around the house and paid close attention to everything he said. Initially, the dog's apprehension and sporadic flinching at loud noises reminded Delgado of the dog's past, but every night they found themselves gradually approaching familiarity. Delgado provided calm words, tender touches, and modest but consistent meals from his money, but despite the dog's peace at home, Delgado saw a glimmer of anxiety every time he went out for his. The dog would pace, whine gently, and scratch sometimes during nightly shifts. Delgado, stressed for time, could only mutter, "I'll be back soon, buddy," as he locked the door behind him. As he was leaving on patrol, Delgado couldn't help but look at his phone more frequently and half wished he had a puppy cam installed because his coworkers made fun of him. With a faint smile, Delgado asked humorously whether he had finally adopted a police partner. He was both proud and unsure of how long a dog's friendship could last in his line of work. Then came the change that contradicted Delgado's presumptions regarding the boundaries of the strays. On a leisurely evening at the station, the Fatherly, we received a report about a suspicious transaction taking place next to Delgado's desk as Watch Commander Captain Reyes approached it. She told the warehouse district that there might be a drug handoff and that you and Officer Perez should investigate. But I've also heard whispers. Your new acquaintance is quite perceptive, and there was a sense of mischief in her voice. Have you ever? When Delgado was shocked to consider training him for actual canine job, he gave cautious, "I don't think he's suited for official policing, Captain. He's just as erratic with sound instincts." Reyes, Archie, and I'd be shocked at what a little training can do, especially if the dog previously demonstrated. Later that evening, Delgado showed courage by returning to his residence in a whirling. His area was peaceful aside from ideas of canine units and official procedures. Delgado lowered himself onto the threadbare couch, allowing the dog, who was hurrying to greet him with a muted tail wag, to recalling what Captain Reyes had said. He softly stroked the dog's fur as it hopped up next to him. Delgado had observed shelter dogs become K9s. Could Airy truly adjust to these tasks? Competent service animals. But he had never seen such a change firsthand. However, the idea persisted, shimmering with the potential that perhaps the dog's destiny was more expansive than Delgado had assumed. Delgado chose to do a quick test the following morning, taking the dog to a remote area at a nearby park at a time when it was armed with some leftover chicken and almost completely depleted. He tried basic. At first, the dog cocked its head in response to the stern yet compassionate directions to sit stay. Head tail wagging undoubtedly, but it appeared to take on within minutes, and Delgado was astounded by how quickly within 30 minutes, the dog was following instructions with ease after associating a command with a treat. Signals, allowing Delgado to move a few yards before declaring, "You know." Delgado, an ordinary stray, whispered a proud smile that tugged at his lips with excitement. Delgado moderated his expectations by recalling how official K9 selection usually focused on the history of particular breeds, and Delgado said out loud, "He's probably got some baggage from his rigorous training," as if the dog could comprehend the dog's glance up at his tongue ling, which was panting a little. Half grinning, Delgado felt a stab of passion as he realized how much he truly wanted to see this puppy flourish in A. More than just survival, the memories of that warehouse night continued to resonate, feeding Delgado's silent belief that the dog's instincts were exceptional. The first significant twist came as a surprise via A. During that evening's phone contact, a woman identified herself as a police-affiliated animal behaviorist. "Captain Reyes gave me your number through the department's unofficial K9 volunteer network," explaining that her voice was brisk but kindly. She suggested that you might have a special candidate for K9 assistance. "Would you mind sharing your dog's shocking experience with me?" Delgado struggled to highlight how the strays intervened at the warehouse without being asked or instruction. The behaviorist sounded interested and demanded information. Under pressure, did the dog exhibit stable focus and obey commands? Delgado hesitated. She listened closely as he described his fleeting training attempts, and then she said, "If you're up for it, I'd want to." After hanging up, "We can meet with him and conduct a quick assessment to determine whether he has the capacity for more complex canine activities." Delgado gazed at the sleeping dog on his living room carpeting while wrestling with a mixture of fear and excitement. Although it required a strict schedule, training the dog for actual police work might be life-changing. Delgado wasn't certain he could supervise training by himself, nor could a canine who'd lived off of leftovers and stayed away from people becoming disciplined enough to perform formal tasks. Delgado discovered, pacing while half laughing at the improbable possibility that the stray-turned hero could actually turn into a valued K9 asset. Delgado made the decision to hesitantly pursue the evaluation. He arranged a meeting with the designated morning officer Perez at a small, private training facility outside of the city. Offered to accompany him since they were interested in seeing the dog that had saved Delgado's life. The anxious father loaded the dog, whom he continued to refer to as his friend or pal, into his vehicle and allowed it to look out the window. When they pulled up to the training site, Delgado's pulse pounded if the dog panicked beneath the passing surroundings. Examination by expert trainers that would resolve the issue, but the dog showed its typical cautious but inquisitive behavior. Behaviorist Maria Vargas, a perceptive woman, led them in, using a few practice activities, distraction tests, and retrieval tasks. Extremely loud noises, but they were all under control, and the dog handled them all with smelling at the unfamiliar surroundings with little apprehension, but obeying Delgado's gentle order. Maria periodically took notes, so even the unexpected clang of a metal gate that caused the dog flinch to lose it didn't create a meltdown. Nodding in agreement, which was unusual for a stray without any official training, she watched in silence before the actual. A former K9 trainer with decades of experience was waved in by Maria, revealing experience. The trainer whispered to Delgado after witnessing Buddy's rapid adaptation. "If you continue structured sessions and establish trust, I see genuine potential in him. He possesses the qualities of intelligence, poise, and calmness under mild stress." Delgado's pulse accelerated because through his strong protective instinct, was this dog really K9? Substance, the idea shone with promise, surpassing the father's previous reservations about going home. Delgado felt conflicted but energized. On the one hand, deciding to enroll in professional K9 training would disrupt his already busy schedule, but on the plus side, it might recognize the dog's bravery, assigning him a task that reflected his spirit of fearlessness, while the dog waggled its tail without any thought of a bright future, content to watch it curl up on while enjoying a safe supper in Delgado's company. Delgado remembered the gunman's shocked curses at the life-saving moment in the warehouse, where a worn blanket was lying in the corner, that had brought them together. "Perhaps you have a destiny greater than ours, visitor," he murmured softly, rubbing behind. As though in accord, the dog blinked its tail and thumped the lamp in the. Officer James Delgado had trouble sleeping the nights after that encouraging evaluation. He would lie in bed thinking. A part of him was concerned because he was overwhelmed by the dog's potential and the life-changing opportunities it offered. Perhaps the dog wasn't really prepared for complicated canine. It was just skilled at following him around. Tasks. But Maria Vargas's assured evaluation held on to him as he fed A. Delgado tested minor training every morning before his shift with cautious anticipation. He used a tennis ball or a tiny pull toy to lead the dog through basic training in the small corridor of his apartment. The instructions: drop it, and it stays incredible. The dog not only complied. However, in quieter periods, it displayed glimpses of genuine intelligence, raising its head eagerly to decipher Delgado's intent. Delgado half laughed at the absurdity of the stray who used to wander the city's alleys and developed AR in a matter of days. Started at the police station, learning the fundamentals of a police canine skill set. As one cop teased another, rumors circulated that Delgado was transforming that stray into a legitimate canine. Ernest inquired as to if Delgado need any outdated training gear, such as agility cones or weighted vests. Captain Reyes. Delgado was brought aside by overhearing. If you're serious, we might test him in a limited capacity, but it requires a systematic program, she warned. And although Delgado acknowledged he was still unsure, Captain Reyes's readiness to. While the dog remained unidentified, he was encouraged to entertain the notion. Enigma Delgado experimented with referring to him as a hero or tracker, but each time the dog reacted better to Delgado's straightforward call a friend, so it felt forced. Delgado reasoned that if Buddy didn't qualify for official police work, they would be stuck with that placeholder for the time being. Regardless of the moniker, they would continue to be companions. But much as Delgado enjoyed Buddy's advancement, the difficulties grew more. Delgado discovered his residence in a state of moderate disorder after returning after late hours. The furniture had been slightly nibbled. Garbage can upend at a friend who was probably bored or nervous and had committed harmful spurts whenever Delgado gently corrected him in an attempt to. He would whisper strong yet, but if you set boundaries without being harsh, you no longer lost. The dog would look down with his tail tucked up, as though he was sorry for not knowing the guidelines for indoor existence. Delgado saw that the brave act was actually a dog still struggling with anxieties, undirected energy outbursts, and a maze of city. According to Perez Delgado's companion, bureaucracy reared its head officer. Official K-9 medical examinations, temperament assessments, and certification are required under departmental regulation. Perez mentioned half-jokingly that Buddy couldn't just show up with the dog if he ever went on duty with Delgado. There's a. Delgado nodded, his heart lowering somewhat. The procedure was notoriously rigorous, while the expense of official K-9 training could be high. Normally, funds were allocated to specially bred puppies from reputable programs rather than strays with unknown genetics. But Perez's actions, more subtly, it would be unfortunate if we didn't at least attempt to exploit that potential when Delgado returned home one evening. He scowled in anticipation of anything from building administration when he discovered a note tucked beneath his apartment door. We heard a brief note scrawled in an uncertain hand by Officer Delgado. We would like to provide some funds to help with supplies or a kennel if necessary for the dog you are training. He deserves a. Delgado was shocked to learn that a grateful citizen had discovered that the city might be supporting Buddy's accomplishment with a $20 donation because of the warehouse story that is circulating in whispered local circles. Alongside the note, Delgado grinned at a friend who was watching him with interest from the couch. "Looks like you have more fans," he said. Delgado slipped the donation aside as the dog cocked his head and wiggled his tail. Another kind reminder that the dog's unanticipated bravery had struck a deep chord for future dog-related costs. However, Delgado's own mental transformation was the biggest. His once solitary daily routine now revolved around, while making sure his friend was nourished, exercised, and cognitively engaged, he discovered that in developing Buddy's abilities, he was also developing a new identity apart from the stoic KN. If the fatherly watch commander made fun of Delgado for having a dog, it was only because the patrol cop was the mentor and caregiver. Half stung, Delgado experienced a surge of paternal pride that mirrored the way a K-9 handler. Not every response was favorable, according to a senior investigator wearing vests on an animal that may literally save lives. At the station, A cynical man called Morales cornered Delgado. Morales, a striker, grunted, "You can't change a dog's entire history with a few commands. What if he loses his temper while on duty?" Calmly repressing his rage, Delgado described Buddy's rapid adaptation. Morales shrugged, "But use caution if the dog makes a mistake in the field. Responsible for it." Delgado abruptly ended the session. Morales was known for being direct, but he wasn't. In situations of intense stress, the completely incorrect companion remained an unknown quantity. In an attempt to allay these concerns, Delgado sought out more detailed training instructions from animal behaviorist Maria Vargas. On his days off, they scheduled quick sessions in a gated training yard where his buddy learned how to react to hand and verbal cues. Signals, short scent tracking activities, and Maria noted that he's intelligent, but additionally sensitive. He will want steady positive reinforcement in addition to routines. Any severe punishment could backfire because of his history, Delgado said. Resolved to treat the dog with compassion, and each session did show progress as the friend learned to concentrate on, even if a stranger clapped or a passing car honked, Delgado's orders. Through repetition of Buddy's terrified edges, he was periodically frightened and stayed by Delgado, moving closer rather than running away. Supplanted by the assurance of a dog discovering he is no longer alone, Maria subtly suggested that with enough commitment, a friend may pass a temperament test for police dog training, which is what Delgado dared to do. Not quite optimistic yet, but in the midst of these changes, Delgado's apartment life became more cozy than he had ever felt in. Years later, returning home no longer seemed like entering a silent box thanks to the warm greeting of tail wags, the energizing, beyond the practical steps of life. The calm of a creature delighted to see him gave him a sense of home that he had never known he was lacking. Delgado found himself conversing with Buddy as though the dog could understand all he said about feeding, grooming, and training. The peculiarities of the workday, sporadic reflections on the city's interminable nights, and the dog would look back with silent affection, a testament to the relationship forged in the heat of conflict but fostered by. Delgado understood that if Buddy died, their everyday deeds of kindness would be the beginning of something greater. If Delgado didn't submit to government scrutiny, it might change the dog's destiny from stray to sanctioned canine companion. Leave him. In the final test, this dog had already shown loyalty. The words of the fatherly watch commander reverberated. Delgado merely thought that the dog's unlikely route would show him that you'd be astonished at what a little training can accomplish. Would keep shining, driving out doubters, and revealing a hero's heart hidden behind tattered fur. The next steps, interviews, exams, and unforeseen challenges would place both Delgado's tenacity and the dog's intuition to try gradually bringing them closer to a climax that none of them had planned, but they all appeared destined to encounter Officer Delgado's subdued ambition. The reality of departmental bureaucracy quickly confronted the attempt to incorporate the lone stray dog into formal canine duties, despite his own personal obstacles. But Captain Reyes, his superior officer, was understanding the remainder of the leadership of the precinct needed to be persuaded that Buddy wasn't a liability in a formal, specialized insurance. Departmental money and a vote were needed for the canine post. Lack of trust from the canine training board, which led to a new set of difficulties. First, the departmental budgetary restrictions thickened the story around Delgado and his canine partner. But in order to train Buddy for a new canine slot, the precinct required gear classes and a certified. Due to the trainer's mistake, Delgado ended himself meeting with Ms. Bao, the city's fastidious finance clerk. They demanded detailed pricing estimates because our canine seats are limited. Just because this dog saved you once doesn't mean that Miss Barrow's fears are unfounded. Promise that he will fulfill all requirements. Even a single error may cost Delgado a lot of money. Simmer, Bud. He wasn't just any dog. He had already demonstrated genuine promise. The constant scratching of Ms. Bao's pen across her budget forms echoed her skepticism, followed by a growing sense of doubt among a few officials. Detective Morales, who favored the conventional method of canine procurement, had puppies with flawless pedigrees. In the break area, the cynic loudly expressed his worry. It's a touching tale. However, in critical procedures, We shouldn't take a chance because one mistake could cost him. Despite the fact that many respected Morales' direct honesty, Delgado felt. A few officers with low morale murmured in private that it wasn't worth battling City Hall over a dog with no official ancestry. Officer Perez attempted to strengthen Delgado's determination by stating that the doubters only need proof Buddy can take it, but some coworkers looked at Delgado pityingly, anticipating disappointment in the wake of. Due to these logistical issues, a new subplot surfaced, including an increasing crime spree around the city. A series of local business owners were shaken by nocturnal burglaries, so Captain Reyes gave him more attention. Delgado is being drawn into longer stints for the fatherly watch on night patrols. The commander urged him to consider this an opportunity to see if Buddy might unofficially accompany you in a limited capacity under your. Even though the suggestion was intriguing, Delgado's legal situation was complex. Watch to see if he can find evidence that he is an asset. Worried about Buddy's culpability in the event that he came into a high-risk situation without official departmental clearance, but Buddy was still able to watch actual circumstances in Delgado's crime department while advancing his DO training. She continued to grow while in the officer's custody, albeit with some setbacks. Late one evening, Delgado showed in. Upon returning home to discover his sofa cushion torn up and stuffing scattered across the living room, his friend cowered in the corner, feeling guilty. Delgado's lowered ears revealed that he was divided between frustration and, "Sorry, I suppose you were bored," he said quietly, reminding himself. Despite his advanced training, Buddy was still getting used to living indoors calmly. After chastising the dog, Delgado decided to increase the number of enrichment activities in their regimen if their bodies really have the motivation to. To become a K9, he required constant mental focus, agility, and basic tracking, obedience along with strict discipline. The father understood the difficulty of juggling a full-time career. Despite the dog's training requirements and overtime shifts, his friend always looked at him. Delgado's weariness vanished with unflinching trust. They'd figure out a way to add. Another source of pressure was when Miss Wong, a local journalist, asked to speak about the stray dog who saved. The police officer implying a potential article in the city newspaper. Delgado is cautious about raising. Ms. Wong continued to email him after her request was postponed because to increased public scrutiny. Inquiries on the dog's history, the warehouse event, and K9 potential made Delgado understand a supportive article may encourage the community to support Buddy's possible training, but he was also afraid of too much publicity. But he was also concerned that excessive spotlight may draw criticism or. Morales' pessimism reverberated in his mind, telling him that if the dog faltered, Delgado will face harsh criticism following media fanfare, divided between caution and hope. Wrote Meng a kind message stating that he would think about making a brief comment if the dog's destiny became more apparent in the midst of these whirling subplots. A subtle yet important tension simmered inside Delgado, and he was unable to get the. Was there a risk associated with the memory of how a friend seemingly jumped into danger that night without hesitation? Given the dog's limitations, Delgado might wind up putting more pressure on his friend than he was prepared for as the father considered these uncertainties. Toby acted as a sounding board, telling Delgado that many dogs flourish in more complex jobs. Toby suggested that, with gentle guidance, he concentrate on what he can do rather than what he couldn't. If we fail, we change course, but at least we give him an opportunity at a surprise invitation. Came from behaviorist Maria Vargas, who had assessed Buddy and asked Delgado and Buddy to join a local, enjoyable trial event, a casual get-together of potential K9 canines and their owners for testing. Maria clarified over the phone the fundamentals of scent work and obedience in a controlled setting without formal stakes. However, it's a great chance to observe how Buddy handles other dogs in mild situations, which made Delgado's pulse race. Ms. Hang's plea for investigation was half exciting and half frightened. Thought that if Buddy did not appear at this trial, it may strengthen their case at the precinct. On the other hand, if Buddy, fearful or causing turmoil, Morales and the city's budget guardians would take advantage of the invitation's failure. Delgado came to the realization that it was time to take a chance. Buddy's transformation from a stray to a potential K9 contender was speeding past the city's departmental cynics on a crimson rampage to a fork in the road. The greatest mystery was the tug of war over the money and the steadfast assistance of co-workers like Perez the dog. Ability to show everlasting commitment, but prone to destructive or fearful episodes. Could Delgado help a friend who was bored during an exam that required accuracy, composure, and flexibility? Over the course of the following few days, Delgado and Buddy accepted Maria Vargas's offer, increased their training efforts by double, executing brief sprints in the park while concentrating on Delgado's voice. Passing diversions, each victory boosted Delgado's self-esteem. Slip reminded him that this dog had a lot of baggage, and while the father scheduled the enjoyable trial on his calendar, he felt the distant drum beat of Destiny's trial, which, although a minor incident in the grand picture, marked the last contest for Buddy's future. Would the stray who used to wander the alleys prove deserving in the eyes of the K9 authorities, mentors, or would this test reveal weaknesses that would force Delgado to give up on his dream? Hawk, a departmental budget, a journalist searching for a story, and these new, priceless rising. Wonderful tale and a traumatic dog gradually coming to trust Delgado and Buddy. Stole themselves. The scene was prepared for the next conflict, and no one was killed or death standoff similar to the warehouse, but an important example of the dog's capacity to show bravery under control. It was unclear from the trial conditions whether it ended in triumph or heartbreak. However, Delgado was certain that he would always be by Buddy's side, because perhaps the same spark could illuminate a route far beyond the shadows of the city if one stray dog could save him once at a nearby park. Officer James Delgado stood on the edge of a temporary training area, his heart racing with the stray dog that had saved Delgard's life. Anticipation Buddy strolled at. Today was the first day of a low-stakes, enjoyable trial event where potential K9 dogs underwent basic obedience and stress management tests. More significantly, it was Buddy's opportunity to demonstrate his full range of abilities to those who were skeptical that a stray could ascend to official service. But as Delgado looked about, he saw how, for Buddy and a few other dogs, primarily German Shepherds, it might be quite intense. The Belle Belgian Malinois danced around with confident handlers, demonstrating that these dogs came from reputable lineages. Some even had vests with training academy insignia stitched on them, and their owners periodically looked suspiciously and chatted. Buddy, Delgado's disheveled Buddy, had ears that flicked at every bark and whistletail that changed from low. Maria Vargas, the animal behaviorist who had been waging to half tucked out. Encouragement. Delgado came over smiling broadly and said, "I'm glad you made it." The dog welcomed her contact when she offered him a soft pat, but he was still apprehensive as he looked around his new environment. We'll begin with easy exercises like finding a concealed toy or maintaining concentration in the face of distractions. Maria. Delgado nodded, explaining that nobody demands perfection and that this is about possibility. Over the preceding few weeks, he and his friend had painstakingly worked on basic orders. The dog showed impressive PR skills, but certain concerns persisted. Unexpected loud noises could make a friend tremble or freeze, so Delgado thought the encouraging atmosphere would help. The dog's assurance rather than instill fear in each participant as the trial got underway alternated in a section that was roped off to mimic mild tension, with obstacles strewn about and a few loud metal clangs. As Buddy's turn came last, Delgado led the way while sheets and a faraway siren recorded it. He entered the ring, his heart racing with nerves and pride, surrounded by a few interested neighbors and off-duty officers. Perhaps M. Hang, a local reporter, waited at the sidelines, perhaps missing Hawkins from. The community had gathered to support the fatherly figure, and watch Commander Reyes stood with his arms folded, observing her. Phrase unintelligible but compassionate, "Friend," Delgado called. The dog's puffed forward ears, perked tail, and firm voice are all doing well so far. "Find it," Delgado urged, tossing a tiny rubber toy behind a low barrier. After sniffing the air and leaping forward to look around, his friend discovered the toy and awkwardly returned it. When they saw Delgado's chest grow, the crowd politely applauded. Maria Vargas hammered a metal sheet when the test shifted somewhat, which was a comfort. Buddy flinched and snapped their ears flat, mimicking the clang of startling noise. Delgado waited for the dog to go away, but to his amazement, his friend recuperated. Looking back at Delgado as though he needed confirmation, Delgado provided a. Buddy trotted closer, pushing his muzzle to Delgado's, and the warm, nice leg. A wave of encouraging whispers swept across the audience. A dog that conquered his anxieties was a clear indication of. With a siren blaring in the background, the final example of flexibility focused on the Delgado directive. Delgado was crouching and holding a tiny Baton toy. "Stay," he said, stepping. The sound of a police siren was heard reverberating over the area. Delgado's heart grabbed the dog as his friend tensed up and trembled. Had previously shown a phobia of loud, high-pitched noises. Would it reverse all of their progress in front of? Everyone was nervous for a time as Buddy's eyes flickered and his tail drooped softly over Delgado, repeatedly being torn between the need to run and the need to stay calm. How? Eventually, he stayed with a wobbly resolve while whining, and a quiver ran down his legs, flattened his ears in distress. Yet he still complied when Delgado called him. Maria's eyes gleamed with relief when his kind friend, with a forward voice, rode to him, grinned, crossed their arms in contentment, and the audience applauded. Small but sincere, Delgado experienced a wave of pride that almost made him cry. Fiercely praising friend while kneeling, giving him sweets, and consoling pats, as if appreciative of the approval. The dog's tail pounded the ground, and Captain Reyes nodded gently, giving Delgado a significant glance that indicated more discussion about Buddy's possible canine future. But in the middle of this victory, a subtle tension was present when a reporter approached Delgado with a microphone in hand. Delgado, still kneeling with Buddy, paused, hoping to make a few statements, to maintain a low profile. But Hang smiled encouragingly at your dog's story. Truly sparked interest in the community, she remarked quietly. Any comments on how you found him were? Toby said, "Where do you intend to take his training?" before Delgado could decline. A favorable angle in the press could help Buddy's acceptability by the department, as Delgado grudgingly stood up to confront Hangs. Briefly answering questions, he described how his friend had stepped in at the warehouse and why he chose to foster him, and how the dog's development gave him hope for advanced training, as seen by Mrs. Bright Eyes, occasionally capturing Buddy's serene demeanor. But when Delgado caught a glimpse of a figure, a fresh storyline came to life. Detective Morales' arms were folded, face in, close to the edge of the crowd. Skepticism as Hang took pictures. Morales watched the spectacle from a distance, his mouth pinched into a narrow line. Morales had sway over departmental budget talks if he publicly chastised Delgado, but his gut constricted. Delgado's decision to risk resources on a whim could make official acceptance more difficult. Maria Vargas provided Delgado a brief complimentary review of Buddy's success following the event. Evaluation of Buddy's performance. He's not flawless, and her dread still persists. Acknowledged, but if the department approves, I'd be happy to assist because his faith in you is a solid foundation. Delgado thanked her, feeling relieved and appreciative as he improved his training. When the little group dispersed, Miss Hawkins gave him a warm thumbs up, and Toby gave Delgado a shoulder clap. He smiled without having a breakdown. Aggression, only bravery, yet Delgado's jubilation was nonetheless muted. He was unable to disregard the prior keen stare of Morales and the official K-9 practical concerns. The department might balk at paying for a dog's education, which costs thousands of dollars and requires expert trainers. Additionally, Delgado's personal finances remained unidentified. He was concerned about Buddy's continuing needs, not to mention advanced education. Driving home may be a long and uncertain journey if the city supported them. Delgado looked in a rearview mirror as his friend stretched happily in the back seat, seemingly proud with his day's accomplishment. He managed a small smile as he remembered the dog's shaky posture before the siren wail and the unadulterated terror it overcame if Buddy had already shown such courage. Perhaps their ethereal bond could help them overcome the skeptics. The father, however, believed that the actual confrontation was a last test of either. After surviving a warehouse skirmish, departmental approval or bureaucratic denial exploded just beyond the next bend. Securing formal K-9 status in a budget-conscious city was a very different matter than mastering a modest fund trial. The cop deemed the altercation worthwhile as Buddy leaped from the car and tail-wagging back at Delgado's apartment. He had been using his own strength to protect these streets for years, not thinking that he would require a companion born of. If any canine deserved a chance at official recognition, it was the same urban grit. When Delgado's life was at stake, the stray who disregarded all fears and the city's gatekeepers denied it. Delgado would find a different means to reward the dog's devotion, even if it meant creating a new route for. Officer James Delgado and his rescue puppy are still lovingly referred to as. Friend transitioned into a new stage of their improbable collaboration, the Prosperous Fun. New interest in the trial demonstration, not only from well-wishers but additionally from the administration of the precincts as more cops discovered that a friend had survived simulating. Stressful shouts of support increased, but so did the whisper of doubt, particularly. The city's limited resources shouldn't be risked on a whim with someone like Investigator Morales. A few days following the trial, Delgado was called to an unclear lineage. Captain Reyes and Miss Barrow were present in a small conference room inside the station. From Detective Morales and Finance, their reactions ranged from inquisitive to. They asked tough questions about Buddy's past and the price of advanced while seated around a worn wooden table. Delgado responded to each question regarding training and the liability should a friend fail certification, highlighting the dog's instincts, devotion, and demonstrated bravery. But Ms. Barlow's brows tightened as she looked through budget binders. We need a clear rationale for purchasing a second K-9. She maintained that the majority of our dogs are from reputable lines. Captain Reyes stepped in, calmly, as the public enjoys a good underdog story, and we also need effective PR these days. We may apply for small grants or sponsor initiatives, particularly if the neighborhood is in favor of them. Morales' arms curled and shot back. But what if the dog panics? We cannot depend just on a fortunate coincidence from that warehouse episode in a true catastrophe. Tension flared as Delgado maintained his cool and tactfully proposed a formal trial term with officials. Oversight, Buddy doesn't yet have full K-9 status, but he has the opportunity to train under. Reyes nodded and asked Mrs. Barrow to look into the possibility of financing. Morales sulked, but ultimately consented to postpone making a decision until the trial's outcome. The meeting ended in. Delgado left an uncomfortable accord, feeling both relieved and uneasy. The following: budgetary restrictions, departmental politics, and Buddy's performance put Teeter on a razor's edge. Demanding environment. But personally, Delgado's life changed as he attempted. In order to balance long training sessions with his regular patrol responsibilities, his companion required daily mental stimulation. Games, quick agility drills, and exposure to a variety of noises. Delgado discovered he needed assistance, so he confided in Toby, who consented to walk his friend through fundamental workouts on the days that Delgado put in extra time. Arrangement increased your admiration for the dog's intelligence. You weren't lying when you said he was learning QEs like A. Although Sponge Toby expressed admiration, the fatherly watch commander made fun of Delgado. That if Delgado didn't keep up in the city proper, petty, Toby could eventually want to take Buddy on his own missions. Ironically, the rise in crimes highlighted the need for additional K-9 units. Officers were searching for leads after break-ins at electronics stores. Reyes mumbled, describing how a well-trained, unspoken was the belief that a tracking dog could assist in identifying criminals or stolen property in deserted buildings. Buddy could fill such a void if proven capable, but Morales remained pessimistic, pointing out to peers that a single act of valor does not ensure constant dependability. Another storyline emerged. Unexpectedly, a brief human interest piece on Delgado and M. Heng was published by the local reporter. From Stray to Possible K-9, a journey of grit and hope describes Buddy's growth. It presented a positive image, thanking the agency for taking the Buddy into consideration, even if he had purebred credentials. Social media was ablaze with residents applauding the ragged hero. Miss Hawkins eagerly informed Delgado that she was donating donations or spiritual support in the comment section of the internet piece that individuals were demanding to see more pictures or information about Buddy's training. Some even inquired as to whether the city could. The Fatherly Watch commander appeared receptive to the notion of holding a public fundraiser to cover the costs of K9 training. But Miss Barlow probably wouldn't value public pressure getting in the way of limited funding, but the city's goodwill may make the difference. Scales at home friend sensed these changes but didn't fully comprehend them. Regimen was extended to include nightly leash walks and training sessions in the station's rear lot under Toby's supervision. Leisure with Delgado, who, these days, seldom had time to spare the dogs. Rarely did worries that were still present subside under this controlled focus. Instead of chewing the couch or pace at night, Buddy discovered comfort sleeping close to Delgado's equipment, as if the dim tension increased as Morales dug through ancient documents, and the smell of the warehouse rescue permeated the cloth. Department records found a rule requiring all new K9 applicants to pass a multi-phase exam that requires advanced crowd control, suspicion apprehension, controlled anger, and obedience. He told Delgado, half smug, "We can't skip any of these steps. If your dog fails even one portion, we're done here." Despite being annoyed by Morales' tone, Delgado realized the detective was on the in private. The Fatherly Watch commander informed Delgado that although Morales appeared to be undermining them, the policy was typical. Buddying up an unproven dog for more complex actions necessitates careful examination. This discovery stoked a fire beneath Delgado, who recognized that friend. Despite being quick to pick things up, they never underwent official aggressiveness or suspect control drills. The father worked up a strategy after Delgado taught him how to deal with conflict outside of the warehouse incident. To Delgado's relief, Maria Vargas put them in touch with a specialist trainer that some K9 units utilize. Was prepared to reduce sessions by pointing to the dog's special tail. But despite this, due to mounting expenses, Delgado had to reduce personal expenditures and shift bills. Buddy is worth it if anything can keep his training on track, Delgado told himself firmly, ignoring the pain of Ms. Hawkins and Toby, Mia's father, undoubtedly saw each presentation from the sidelines. Assistants in their own ways. On occasion, Toby paid a portion of Mrs. training costs. Hawkins quietly solicited money from the community, but Morales was waiting to demand answers, which the father was aware of. That a shortened simulated K9 assessment for the next advanced test would be Buddy's last opportunity to demonstrate his abilities and dependability if they were successful. If they failed, Delgado was afraid that his friend would be accepted by the department, be written off as a sincere interest that eclipses even the heroics of the warehouse as the date for that. As the official test drew closer, Knights discovered Delgado seated on the ground while Buddy ran through short bite or muzzle drills. Following exercises under Toby's supervision, the dog's eyes remained steadfastly trusting. However, if aggressiveness training called for lunging or snarling at a practice sleeve, Delgado's uncertainty briefly surfaced. In a hushed voice, conscience heavy weighed the dog's tender feelings against the severe demands of a police confrontation. He would reassure him, saying, "You understand that we only do this to protect the innocent." Right friend probably didn't understand the phrases, but he was tail wagging somewhat Delgado every time he finished a sequence. Felt at peace knowing that they were paving a way that recognized Buddy's bravery, which he demonstrated. Impromptu that evening in the warehouse, prepared to defend human life without any prior training. Officer James Delgado felt the weight of several plot lines coming together like a final K9 evaluation drawing near. His little apartment frequently felt like a makeshift training ground with chairs moved aside for agility drills during tidal waves. Toby's donated by its sleeve hanging from a coat rack, and rolled up rugs acting as makeshift barriers. Buddy the one. The unkempt stray responded to every new activity with remarkable eagerness. The dog thrived on the structure and was now used to Delgado's directions, but there was still some slight fear. Remained in Buddy's eyes every time a loud noise or strange guest interrupted their daily schedule. Distinct traces of. Captain Rees observed his days on the street from the wings, providing Delgado with, "We've reduced your patrol schedule so you can concentrate on training and provided you with moral support in the precinct halls." As she nodded at the dog's progress reports one afternoon, She warned him to be ready because Morales wants to see results. Delgado, who will be attending the evaluation, forced a tight smile that he knew. Morales continued to be the most vocal internal critic, maintaining that formal routes and pedigree were more important than A. Miss Wong's second article further stirred the pot by displaying unbridled bravery, acquired popularity, and was thrilled with the dog's ongoing success. So she produced a follow-up article about the dog wearing a badge in Site 1. Strays ascend to canine training, generating modest media buzz and being picked up by local bloggers. The PR officer for the precinct even took calls for national outlets who wanted to know more about the hero-turned-stray. Although several station employees applauded the favorable publicity, Miss P. Barrow, the finance clerk, was secretly concerned about. Financial realities are overshadowed by outside pressure. We cannot be coerced into funding anything just because the public enjoys a good story. As diplomatically as ever, she complained to Reyes, who said that if Buddy truly surpassed the hype on Ms. Barr's lips, the narrative would be more than that. Frowned, indicating that the budget battle was still ongoing, while Toby controlled aggression with a suspect in a rented vehicle, which helped Delgado get ready for one of the most difficult aspects of canine training. Toby emerged from the practice field behind the station with the protective sleeve Delgado ordered his friend to wear, which prompted at first. The friend appeared unsure of the bulking and let the dog bark and lunge at the padded arm. Delgado knelt down to calm him down at the thought of actively biting him, patiently repeating the order with firmness. Every time he finished the assignment, Delgado swiftly gave him the motivation to clamp onto the sleeve. Give the dog praise, to help them understand that this aggression was situational rather than random. Delgado's heart was broken by Buddy's conflicted eyes, and he wanted to protect the dog's kind spirit while creating a essential ability to apprehend hazardous individuals during these intense exercises. An unexpected guest showed up. Arthur, a shy teenage kid, was at the station with a little cardboard box in his hand, anxiously awaited Delgado's shift to end, and when he approached him in the lobby, Arthur admitted that he had been reading about Buddy's story on the internet. I saved a kitty after he timidly described. I produced them because I couldn't keep it, and I wanted to thank you for demonstrating to everyone that strays can be heroes. He unlocked the. Delgado was moved by the gesture and received the box with the homemade dog biscuits. Them with appreciation, as this act of unexpected generosity brought to recall how Buddy's journey had struck a chord with many who felt ignored or overshadowed, much like Buddy had been the fatherly watch commander who had noticed the expanding public. Delgado was pressed for enthusiasm if Buddy did well on the final assessment. Public outrage would be enormous if we turned him away without a reason, and the agency cannot ignore it. Delgado recognized success would guarantee a friend's spot, but it would also draw attention to them in case they make any mistakes. Morales 4. One appeared ready to attack at the first sign of weakness, especially when it came to crowd management or gunfire tests. Thus we can't have a canine who cowers at loud noises. Reminded the father, Delgado, of Buddy's. Prior to the fright at the siren, you were aware that every training exercise using controlled simulated bullets posed a real risk. Although the settings gradually improved, Buddy's stress persisted, and a new storyline kept emerging. When animal rights activist Ms. Green, who had previously questioned Delgado's strategy, suggested inviting a small number of young people from a nearby rescue group to watch Buddy's training, it can demonstrate. They explained that dogs are more than just pets or strays. With the right training, they can serve and protect. Ms. Green added that Delgado was cautious about going public in a responsible manner. Demos acknowledged the educational value, so he and Toby set up a low-key demonstration in the backlit of the station, allowing the kids to observe their companion obey simple directions or the dog's composed, orderly manner. Ms. Green's contrast with his disheveled appearance made Delgado smile. He is living proof that I was harmed and that I was wrong to doubt him. That training and kindness can change even the most neglected animal, but every step forward. The father worked with Maria, keeping in mind that the last departmental test was coming up in a few days. Vargas participated in a simulated building search as part of their final rigorous training session, utilized an abandoned garage, hiding Delgado and Buddy inside. Arrived at daybreak and learned how to manage the cramped space, the darkness, and the sound of. At first, The dog's ears flattened at every clang of metal as footsteps entered. Like a far-off trickle of water, Delgado knelt and slowly spoke encouraging words. In a few minutes, his friend moved forward, his nose twitching, his tail half up in focus. Delgado sighed after catching Toby's smell and barking briefly to signal. Unquestionably, there had been progress and relief, but Morales learned about this private run, complained that Delgado was spoiling the dog, but Captain Reyes dismissed the objection and urged Delgado to keep your cool. No matter how good your friend succeeds, you will encounter a cynic, she warned him. If both of you do well on the formal test, the brass will be unable to dispute the results. Thus, at the end of the Hawks scrutinized every expense in the city's intricate network of subplots, which resulted in an ever tighter budget. Teenage fans of the dog's underdog story looked to seasoned investigators and an expanding fan base for inspiration. Expecting evidence of dependability, Delgado took comfort in Buddy's stillness every night. The future of the dog may lie in his presence curled at his feet training as a possible canine. Or maybe it had simply remained evidence of their exceptional bond. In any case, anyone who saw them in the intangible synergy created in violence and fostered by caring that prepared them to face the final examination that would determine whether the stray who saved a cop may indeed merit a spot among the final departmental evaluation day dawned cold and dismal for the city's official guardians. As if the city, prior to the alert, Delgado Rose, the breath cop, was detained in his stomach, informing the precinct's professional canine trainers in a tiny panel that the stakes had risen in a matter of hours. Whether Buddy, the lone stray canine, could be accepted into a formal training pipeline would be determined by higher-ups. In the event that Delgado's goal of granting his friend a respected position as an officer's companion is not realized, the dog would continue to be a cherished companion, but it might be marginalized during departmental acceptance mornings at. Buddy would typically take his university form for the day, have a quick cup of coffee, and stroll a short distance to Delgado's flat. Shift today, it felt more serious and packed with potential, like if my friend. Feel the strain as Delgado passed him, pacing silently close to the door. Delgado knelt as the dog looked up, its tail waving slightly as though it was looking for confirmation, rubbing friend's ears gently. We've come a long way, buddy. Just try your hardest, okay? The dog blinked and leaned into the love regardless of how the day transpired, and I promised to keep my friend safe in. Throughout his life, the assessment will be conducted in a large training center outside the city that is typically utilized by. When the official canine units arrived, Delgado parked next to a chain-link fence and provided guidance. Starting out with a relaxed heel, the dog's eyes flashed around when he saw tall barriers and specific obstacle courses. And a half-dozen uniformed handlers with their own canine partners, the fatherly watch. Commander Reyes soon showed up, looking anxious but composed as usual. Delgado nodded and smiled tightly as she inquired. This is the first time he's been tested. Detective Morales remained near a group of bystanders with their arms folded, showing mistrust. I sincerely hope he doesn't freeze. Miss Barrow from the financial department was also present in each frown line, probably to determine whether Toby and Miss Hawkins' expenditure was warranted. And Buddy Maria Vargas paced while a few encouraging co-workers waited in the background, ready to cheer for Delgado. The test started close to the training area, with clipboards ready to help the canine teachers if necessary. Using simple obedience, Delgado ordered his friend to run in front of onlookers through a brief obstacle course that involves navigating between orange cones and leaping low hurdles. The dog initially responded hesitantly to the command to sit and stay, but quickly discovered her smattering of kind applause echoed through the small crowd as she completed each phase with rhythm and few mistakes. Delgado sighed with satisfaction. Everything was going well. Then, a highly distracting situation arose. While Buddy was navigating the room, a couple of volunteers in uniform screamed and slammed metal sheets, causing Buddy to quiver. Despite the abrupt clamor tail drooping, Delgado's firm orders and kind assurance prevented him from running away. Friend pushed forward, breathing heavily but not backing away, watching for Delgado's indications. The fatherly watch commander nodded in agreement as Maria Vargas subtly praised his tenacity, yet tension. During the suspect apprehension exercise, a trainer appeared with a bite, just as Morales was expecting it with a critical eye. Delgado led his friend to search while Sleeve going into a corner to mimic a hidden suspect, and the dog scented. Occasionally stumbling at echoes in the spacious training area, Barn Morales tapped his foot, anticipating a slip-up. But after a while, the trainer's smell was detected by a friend, who barked a warning close to a pile of crates, and the trainer leaped out, pointing a fictitious weapon, and Delgado yelled, "Get him, bud." He leaped and clamped onto the padded sleeve. Although his hold wasn't as quick or firm as a high-B canine may have, he struggled to release his grip until Delgado gave a stand on some. As onlookers applauded, Morales simply arched an eyebrow while writing something on his clipboard. When Delgado's most dreaded moment finally came, the live shooting test, nobody would be shooting at them. But as the dog was in the middle of an activity, the instructor would fire a few blanks or target bullets to see how the friend handled loud noises. Delgado's friend was blasted by blasts that resembled real threats. How would he react to actual muzzle flashes and echo? The test started with a straightforward. Delgado used a short-range commanding body to toss a training toy in a retrieve drill, pull the teacher aside, and fire a blank cartridge into the crack, which resonated. He skidded to a stop, flattening his tail and frightening his friend as he went through the space. With his heart constricted, dropping, Delgado knelt and called gently, "Friend, fetch it." "All right." Another blank echoed, making Buddy more anxious. The dog briefly froze. Grimly, Morales typed frantically on his notepad while whimpering faintly. However, Delgado remained calm and repeated, refusing to let fear win. Buddy retrieved gently, but he drew his eyes away from the bullets too. Delgado's comforting posture was interrupted by a direct test partner who whimpered once more but pushed himself ahead, grabbed the toy, and ran back to Delgado. The cheers that ensued were. Toby smiled as Miss Hawkins gave a quiet but sincere whoop. Morales was given a profound glance by the fatherly watch commander. Despite not smiling, Ms. Barrow stopped writing and chewed her lip, as if impressed. Enough to make her monetary worries go away. The officer knelt when the friend placed the recovered object at Delgado's feet, cuddling the dog as the buddy's eyes were still wide from the explosions, and the on-duty trainers gave him a few grim looks. Delgado sensed tears threatened this dog once, but he relieved himself by waving his tail. A shivering stray in an abandoned alley had just been subjected to the sound of live gunfire because he was following his new partner's instructions. Wasn't noteworthy. Delgado wasn't sure what else could be, and Maria Vargas came up to commend Buddy's bravery. With genuine dread, she said quietly, "He's not flawless or fearless, but his." Even though Captain Reyes seemed SED, whispering to Miss Bow about Untapped, "Our friendship is strong enough to endure." Potential Morales maintained a neutral facade by himself, but his silence revealed a lot. He hadn't noticed the obvious failure he had expected. The group dispersed when the examination was over. Delgado and Buddy were left to pace nervously while the official K9 trainers withdrew to discuss the results in private. Toby gave Delgado a shoulder clap outdoors, saying he had passed every test. Mia's father nodded while petting Buddy's dog's fur. Despite his worst fear, it leaned on him and groaned softly in tiredness while M. Hawkins packed her up, camera grinning triumphantly. Ms. Barrow came up and nodded respectfully. "See about budgeting," Delgado said, her lips curving in pleasant adoration. The friends' breathed muscles relaxed, even though acceptance wasn't assured. Demonstrated the ability to command respect, and with relief, Delgado gently lifted his friend. But when he got into his car, he understood that the department's final yes or no, whether formal or not, it may take days or weeks, but Delgado was aware of one fact his friend had overcame his personal anguish to support his spouse that evening as they made their way back to the Delgado flat. Smiled at the dog's exhausted satisfaction. "No matter what they decide," he said, presenting a well-earned treat. Buddy the dog licked Delgado's palm. "And you are my hero." As though to indicate that the sentiment was reciprocal, neither party realized the final decision that would either pave the way for an unparalleled K9 future or make Buddy's tale a noteworthy anecdote in departmental history. In the days following Buddy's outstanding performance, The precinct was a hive of activity over the James Delgado, the department's official decision officer, is both optimistic and exhausted. Returned to his usual shifts, but some officers made fun of him while he awaited Captain Reyes and higher command's decision. When will your mutt receive his badge? While others merely nod in support. Morales, predictably, tight-lipped, remained silent, but a subtle fatigue permeated his manner, as if he anticipated Buddy's defect to appear at any time in Delgado's tiny flat, where daily training exercises had become the new standard. Keep Buddy's momentum going with quick walks to keep his mind active and create a tension that only an official. Late every night, Delgado would curl up on his shabby couch to escape the green light. Companions stumbling at his feet, both worn out from the day's activities, yet a momentary bond between them. Delgado was reminded of their progress since that terrible night in the warehouse, as the city's crime scandal. Precinct resources were overextended because to a surge in break-ins and small-scale robberies. As minor crime increased in several locations, Captain Reyes became increasingly convinced that extra K-9 assistance dogs that might be able to hunt down offenders or detect hidden departmental red tape still loomed large over the contraband. According to finance staffer Ms. Barlow, provided merely a veiled warning about spending too much money for an unknown candidate in spite of the public's swarm. Even the fatherly watch commander acknowledged that although Buddy's field test was encouraging, a subtle confrontation occurred when the higher levels wanted comprehensive records and standardized training certificates. Simmered between Morales, who has always been the pragmatic, and Reyes, who each represent distinct groups within the precinct, claimed that a single act of bravery combined with little training did not ensure constant dependability under extremely stressful stakes. Reyes said that Buddy's development and his relationship with Delgado demonstrated a natural synergy that the best K-9 couples may be more devoted and have a stronger spirit than some solely bred K-9s. Bonded in trust rather than just blood, she informed Morales during a heated hallway conversation. Morales shrugged in response, but a suspect won't be deterred by trust alone if the dog. Delgado heard them in a frenzy, experiencing the anxiety of being enmeshed in these departmental. As the official talks stretched on, the journalist approached Ms. Hang to discuss politics. Sensing a possible turning point, Delgado requested an update on Buddy's future moves for an interview. A quick chat over coffee was permitted in the station since Lobby Buddy was cautious about excessive publicity and slept at Delgado's. M. Hung softly inquired about the dog's condition, while the side head on his paw appeared unconcerned by the flurry of attention. The carefully measured change from a stray to a near K-9, eager Delgado voice acknowledged the community's support, but underlined that they were still awaiting the department's final decision. Ms. Hang's eyes shone with compassion, but Delgado graciously refused to speculate more and watch how the brass makes a decision. He ended quietly. Delgado's routine was interrupted by an unexpected phone call. Captain Reyes called. Late one afternoon, she sent him to her office with a brief message. We may need your dog's assistance with a matter. Delgado, an inquisitive and nervous unofficial visitor, arrived to discover Reyes meeting with A. Two investigators were anxiously examining a burglary pattern after spotting a suspect connected to many break-ins. Backup units were under approach after the man fled a scene into a wooded area, but he might disappear in the dense undergrowth. Just after dark, Reyes leaned to Delgado and said in a hushed voice, We don't have any. There's an official K-9 on duty nearby. If you're interested, perhaps a friend could assist us with tracking. Off the record, Delgado's heart was crushed when he understood that this might be Buddy's unexpected real-world test. The fatherly watch commander scowled at the possibility of not having official authorization to demonstrate or refute his readiness. With no safety equipment and no assurance that his friend wouldn't freeze, Delgado had a profound. Sure, he can finish this in a few minutes. Delgado was taking his own vehicle too. Toby, a friend, is breathing nervously in the back seat of a forested lot on the city's edge. Arrived at dusk, having offered to go with them despite Reyes's warning to keep the operation modest. Sergeant Peters briefed officers in uniform who were searching the perimeter with spotlights due to the cold air tension. The final person observed running into the Pines backup was a suspect who may have been armed, arriving from out of town, but there was not enough time or the criminal might elude capture or hurt an innocent bystander, Delgado. We have trained for searches, so let's trust one another and accomplish this with the dog's ears. I knelt next to Buddy, voice low. Delgado showed him a piece of material from the suspect's discarded bag, and Toby manned it as his pricked tail gave a muted wag. The perimeter as flashlight beams flickered as Delgado and his leashed companion dove into the woodland darkness. The dog sniffed the cloth and then dipped his head across the foliage, which illuminated the trailing vines and scattered rubbish, pushing Delgado forward with moderate urgency while keeping his muzzle to the ground. Every sound of leaves rustling or a twig snapping could indicate the presence of the culprit. So would Buddy stay? Could Delgado prevent the dog from becoming frightened if they came across the man, unintentionally causing him more pain? They used a flashlight to draw shapes in the gloom, pausing sometimes, whining quietly at a distracting smell, but Delgado gently brought him back to the task at hand. Orders. The dog tightened up and raised in a familiar gesture that Delgado recognized. As a warning, they followed Buddy's persistent tugging between fallen logs and dense pines until the dog stopped suddenly next to a bush. Delgado heard heavy breathing, and then he heard a man crouching just beyond the foliage. Police, Delgado snarled while holding half-darkness eyes that were glinting with dread or hate. Tao showed her hands on Buddy's leash, and the culprit hesitated before making a crazy dash. Buddy moved more quickly than Delgado anticipated, lunging, causing the man to falter. Delgado took advantage of the moment, tackling the suspect as his friend snarled and refrained from biting until Delgado gave the order to start the altercation. Concluded swiftly, with Toby coming in from the side to help pin the guy down while administering adrenaline said through Delgado's veins, but his friend waited, sobbing once, as though uncertain, and Delgado gave him a. Officers arrived, comforting Pat and softly complimenting him for a job well done. Sergeant Peters radioed that the suspect, who was cursing beneath his breath, was being quickly cuffed. Toby's eyes flickered to his friend in the photo with obvious surprise. Chase, panting after the brief encounter, gave Delgado a big smile that was all of him. Delgado nuzzled the guy like a pro, nodding and breathing raggedly, even in the gloom, on Delgado's leg, as if recognizing the release of the tension. Another life circumstance had called for Buddy's expertise in a less spectacular way, and Delgado felt the warm glow of validation. Then the warehouse disaster, but it's equally important that the dog conquered his anxiety, shut down Delgado's orders, and helped the police apprehend a real culprit. Buddy's triumph was communicated to the Fatherly Watch commander via the radio before they left the woods. Delgado. Reyes's voice had a sense of pride as she said, "Secure the area. Bring them in good work." Morales observed the. Delgado was worn out but triumphant, and he buckled, but he said nothing despite his look showing reluctant admiration. Friend into the vehicle for the return trip. This could be the last straw to demonstrate Friend's value to the department. The dog, whose tail was pounding on the sofa, only looked at Delgado with gullible eyes, unaware of. Despite the afterglow of capturing the departmental politics, they were fully aware that they had once again achieved together. Anxiety spread across Precinct Officer Delgado's impromptu response to the burglary suspect in the wooded lot. Despite being successful, Buddy's use on an active call sparked questions among the. Detective Morales, in particular, noted that Buddy's more conventional ranks. Engagement wasn't officially approved, and the department might have been held accountable if things had gone wrong. Objected, but Captain Reyes, the Fatherly Watch commander, quietly defended Delgado's quick judgment, suggested that Buddy limit his field participation until the formal decision was made because we couldn't take the chance of giving detractors more ammunition, she observed tactfully, and Delgado paid attention to this counsel divided between pride in Buddy's achievement in the real world and a desire to maintain departmental standards for the days he balanced routine patrol work while Buddy receives hush-hush training to further hone the dog's suspect search abilities and build stronger discipline, while the station's buzz portrayed Buddy as a folk hero. While some officers discreetly discounted him as an abnormality, others respected his bravery. One peaceful evening, the dog himself was blissfully oblivious to the political currents around his future. However, Ms. Hang published another brief report emphasizing Buddy's contribution to the capture of a burglary suspect. She left out any information that could put Delgado in hot water. Streets to the Beach Dog assists in apprehending local criminals. And it sparked new media attention when Miss Barrow, after reading the article, the finance clerk went to see Captain Reyes because she was worried that the city might give in to pressure from media, informed her in frustration that the dog's steady performance warranted significant. Considering this, Ms. Bao reluctantly agreed to schedule a final budget gathering to determine definitively whether Buddy's official K-9 training will be partially funded by the fatherly. Delgado discovered that when the day of that budget meeting drew closer, the watch commander informed him to anticipate a decision within a week. Toby's attempts to provide calm comfort only served to ease his growing restlessness. Delgado had dedicated numerous hours to bolstering Buddy's self-assurance among crowds surrounding sirens and during. Another example of advanced obedience in the station's training yard flew smoothly, and a friend sniffed out something hidden. Despite the barking K-9s, contraband samples complied with recall instructions and overcome. Maria Vargas satisfied with mild, startled testing and sent positive feedback to the. He has outperformed most K-9s with his history. According to the official K-9 committee, she concluded, strongly advise comprehensive departmental training. However, Morales, who is still unsure, insisted on one last test of poise under real pressure that goes beyond planned exercises. Captain, reluctant to push the friend further, Reyes attempted to argue that advanced scenarios or actual calls could be too dangerous. However, Morales noted that in order to allocate funds, we must demonstrate that this deviation won't materialize in a real emergency. Reyes said he was open to any fair test after overhearing Delgado. So, the discussion came to a quiet conclusion as long as it didn't put the dog in danger or jeopardize safety procedures. Agreed that Morales would keep an eye out for any important calls or crises that would require a buddy to react. Unexpectedly, the night before the budget meeting, a panic call broke out, escalating the previously restrained tension. Shots were reportedly fired during an armed robbery at a small convenience store close to Delgado's patrol area, and the suspect ran away on foot into an industrial area. Normally, Delgado's adrenaline would have surged, allowing him to react quickly, but he paused again, wondering if he dared to put his friend in the squad car, so making him an unofficial K-9. Once more, Commander's voice cracked, and Delgado thought that if Buddy remained behind him, he may lose the chance to demonstrate his readiness, since he is divided between being cautious and having faith in Buddy's talents. If the circumstance called for a tracking dog companion, Delgado made a rapid selection. Was all they had around as they hurried to the location where Delgado came to see a shaky store worker behind the counter is being treated by paramedics for a small gunshot wound to her shoulder. Officer Perez entered the similarly tense squad car as witnesses pointed down the allegedly armed suspect disappeared into the poorly lit alley. Half-collapsed walls and a maze of dumpsters. Delgado and Perez exchanged glances as they considered whether we had a K-9. Perez. Despite the danger they were facing, Delgado first met his friend in my automobile. Delgado brought Buddy on a harness after determining that Buddy's involvement was necessary due to the suspect's possible risk. The dog's eyes flicked to the uncertain alley ears as it regarded the shiny strips. Delgado, the easy buddy of the faraway wail of sirens, muttered, delivering a piece of previously packed as evidence. The cloth from the suspect's discarded glove is now being used for a fast scent reference. After lowering its tail, the dog sniffed the ground while toggling its nose from. Perez supplied backup from side to side as Morales, who had come late, stood observing with their arms crossed in a curious and lingering manner. To make sure Delgado wasn't going to escalate the tension, the fatherly watch commander lingered close to the boundary, surged as their friend led them into the alley, oblivious to stale smells and old trash, focused on the smell of fresh human beings. Every step Delgado took caused his adrenaline to rise. This was an unfiltered situation. No. Controlled setting. So if Buddy stumbled in terror or was startled by a gunshot, the culprit might flee or the situation could get out of hand. Suddenly, a friend pulled to the left, leaving a tall trash can behind, releasing a Delgado interpreted the brief bark as a warning and motioned for Perez to come closer from the opposite angle. Morales prepared his sidearm suspiciously while trailing behind. The actual threat quickly eclipsed the suspect, who quickly fled from behind the police. Drop a garbage pistol that sparkles under a flickering alley bulb. Delgado yelled at the culprit, who paused before swinging the revolver in a frantic moment. Past friend jumped forward and barked wildly, compelling the suspect to. Perez sidestepped and grabbed the opportunity to tackle the man from behind the gun. Delgado hurried in to stop the noise as it clattered to the pavement, producing an echo off the brick walls. Suspect's arms as his companion circled, growling at the smallest movement. Morales, blinking in surprise, the suspect was swiftly handcuffed for the duration of the encounter. Concluded with a gasping heartbeat. No guns were fired, and no officers were hurt. Delgado sank back, ordering friend off, and the dog obeyed, panting, with a calm yet firm command. The suspect swore and spat at the ground, his tail twitching from the remaining adrenaline in the silence, and Perez, panting, turned to. Delgado's wide eyes show that I might not have obtained a clear angle if he hadn't startled him at that moment. Buddy felt a wave of relief as Delgado patted his flank, and Morales pocketed his lips in silence. His stoic features showed a hint of reluctant respect for his weapon as Captain Reyes and Mrs. Barrow arrived after learning some details from the radio, and the suspect was taken away. Delgado's pistol, the subdued suspect, the frightened convenience store clerk, and the scene were all inspected. Her partner gave Delgado a curt nod while standing confidently beside Reyes' jaw set. Mrs. Bow lips parted, her eyes gleaming with approval. She said nothing but gave a little, nearly uncontrollable smile that seemed impressed by Buddy's contribution to the takedown as they returned to the station inn. Delgado led his friend to the break room cops during the pre-dawn silence, who heard he was inundated with inquiries, some of which were disbelieving, while others were congratulatory. Toby smiled and clapped Delgado's shoulder, demonstrating his unstoppable Morales despite his restraint. Whispered a quick "good job," feeling that whatever last reservations Morales had been at, Buddy's performance in genuinely chaotic circumstances had the least amount of influence on Morales, the department's biggest skeptic. Couldn't find anything wrong with the outcome tonight. Perhaps the remaining brass would finally give them the all-clear as. The fatherly watch commander gave me a half-smile as Delgado and Buddy left the station into the dappled morning light. Delgado's heart leaped as he looked down at Buddy. The dog stared back up, and she whispered gently, "I think you just sealed the deal." Wagging in quiet satisfaction and tiredness ahead of tomorrow's official K-9 committee assessment and budget meeting. Felt less intimidating, since if there was any proof of Buddy's worth in the real world, it was right here in the aftermath of yet another successful takedown, demonstrating that Array's steadfast devotion might rival the greatest. Dawn painted a picture of pedigreed canines, and the horizon pink Delgado carefully scratched. Buddy's voice broke with appreciation. "We did it, Buddy." And even if the ultimate decision was still hours away, it appeared like the city had witnessed a new level of dedication that was born in it. Lane cultivated by destiny and forged in the course of duty. A silence shrouded the high-level meeting to determine Buddy's destiny was coming to an end in the station's conference room. Captain Reyes, Miss. Officer James Delgado sat at one of the long tables that Barlow investigator Morales and a few other officials were gathered around. Buddy sleeping at his feet with his hands clutched tightly after weeks of stressful, through preparations and silent bravery, they had reached this last encounter with. Each speaker says the once stray dog is now formally a member of the city's K-9 team. Having a voice, Maria Vargas gave her expert evaluation of Buddy's temperament and skills that Toby, who has seen innumerable training sessions, attested to. The quick learning curve of the dog even allowed the fatherly watch commander to step in. The department's need for additional K-9 resources was reiterated in an advising role. Delgado observed that dogs, in particular, were not scared to quickly adjust to the volatility of actual life. Only Morales and Mims Bow remained unsure, swinging cautiously positive. Morales cleared his throat and looked around the room, scowling at budget charts and data sheets. "I've never denied that the dog did well in 2 instances, but we have to take consistency into account. One outburst on the field may be catastrophic. Miss Barlow gave a forceful nod, citing a line in her ledger. The expense isn't negligible, particularly for a dog without a proven lineage. If we spend thousands, and Delgado's jaw tightened, but we're left with a bad public image and wasted money after advanced training fails. Buddy had already shown that he wanted to dispute, but he kept his cool and let the facts speak for themselves. Captain Reyes rose. Looked solid twice now. Friends took action when it was most important, once saving. Delgado is helping to apprehend a suspect in the warehouse once more. We discussed the cost, but is it possible to quantify the lives he's saving? Possibly saved if we ignore a dog that has displayed such unadulterated bravery. We might, moreover, be ignoring the intangible advantage of a motivational tale for our neighborhood. Mr. Hawkins. From the rear of the room, the organizer nodded in agreement with Reyes's remarks. Delgado acknowledged that Reyes was using moral persuasion in addition to reasoning to shift the balance in Buddy's favor. A brief quiet. After the tension crackled, Miss Barlow sighed and put her papers down. I don't mean to be callous, but the dog's accomplishments are indisputable. But we operate I suggest a compromise. We allot a portion of the city budget, not a charity. Stipend for 3 months of probation, during which the dog must pass state-level exams. If he doesn't, or a significant issue happens, we withdraw the funds. Morales's lips appear pursed, reluctant but not explicitly opposed. The fatherly watch commander mumbled in quiet agreement with the rest of the panel. Sent Delgado a subtly encouraging signal, suggesting that this could be Buddy's formal debut. Suddenly, a feeling of anxiety and relief surged through Delgado's chest, causing tension to rise. Obtain their opportunity, but there would be a lot of strain. He thanked Mrs. Barrow and the panel, pledging to support Buddy's, and Captain Reyes nodded in agreement. The discussion was ended with a brief notice that final documentation would be prepared in the coming days. Some policemen in that Buddy's precinct were given probationary K-9 status, offered sincere congrats, while some made light-hearted comments about whether the ragtag hero would adjust to the formal training schedule. Delgado, feeling both nervous and proud, spent reviewing the requirements for the advanced program over the course of the following several evenings. Buddy, blissfully oblivious to the additional burden on his future, only wagging their tails and cuddled up at Delgado's feet whenever he stopped reading to stroke behind the dog's ears. Then came the last unanticipated disaster, which put Buddy's preparedness to the ultimate test. A panic call came through. The station depicts a domestic hostage scenario in a remote area close to the river where the culprit is reportedly threatened to use violence against 2 family members if police approached. So SWAT teams were sent in, and after learning the specifics, Captain Reyes saw that a K-9 may be used to assist in the hunt for suspected co-conspirators. Although Buddy was officially still on probation, time was of the essence, and the secret rooms. When the department's main K-9 was injured and unable to work, everyone looked to Delgado Morales for candid questions. Utilizing a friend in such a dangerous situation, but Captain Reyes finally let Delgado make the final decision. Delgado decided to give the dog an opportunity to prove himself by hammering him. We proceed slowly and keep him away from direct conflict unless absolutely required. He informed Toby, who had offered to cover for Ms. Hawkins, gleaning a partial information from Reyes, who silently prayed for the dog's protection because he knew that one mistake this might ruin Buddy's future and endanger actual lives when they arrive at. Under the vigilant protection of SWAT, Delgado examined the tense scenario at the Riverside residence, which negotiators attempted to contact. The suspect's voice cracked with rage as they spoke inside a dark house with windows barred. Delgado, wearing tactical gear, knelt behind a SWAT with Buddy over a phone line. Vehicle, if there's a concealed area or unknown exit, we may need a partner to check to see if anyone is concealing a SWAT. The leader clarified, and Delgado nodded while humming adrenaline and looking at his friend's ears. Perked up and shaking in expectation, the suspect was hauled into the discussions. Refused to give up. Suddenly an internal, distressed voice begged for assistance. Increasing the SWAT's eagerness, They devised a plan of entry where a small squad would break through the back door while the negotiators were preoccupied. If another armed accomplice lurked, the frontline suspect would have seconds to secure the captives. Might notice them initially, Delgado's heart pounded. Was Buddy really prepared for such? Delgado's friend was at his heel when the breach exploded in a swirl of splintered wood and shouted demands. Followed the SWAT lead into the little living area, where it was dark and raining with only the cries of SWAT flashlights. Delgado, a guy with a metal bar, leaped from behind a door as clashing footsteps echoed. The dog automatically signaled Buddy by lunging and barking fiercely, causing the figure to drop the bar in shock. SWAT discovered the primary offender focused on the suspect after another officer pinned him, cleared the passage, and pushed deeper. Delgado hovered just behind a comrade wearing a protective shield as the hostages were in a corner. The tension from the drawn weapons, which were poised but restless, choked the suspect as he swore. Hearts thumping, SWAT stood ready to negotiate or storm, brandishing a weapon at the quivering prisoners. Delgado was breathless when one of the hostages made a last-ditch effort to escape, which caused the suspect to swing the gun violently. Noticed a small gap that allowed Buddy to advance in a controlled takedown. "Friend, go," he yelled, and the dog leaped over the threshold, his precision jaws clamping down on the. SWAT officers saw the man howling and the gun rattling out his grasp on the suspect's sleeve, swept in and completely disarmed him, allowing the captives to escape unharmed. Although trembling, Delgado hurried over to Buddy and abruptly ordered him to stop. A stillness descended as officers controlled the scene, and the dog was released instantly, panting and eyes wild with adrenaline. Delgado's realization that his friend had just performed a classic C9 maneuver, eliminating a deadly threat in the smoky aftermath without endangering innocent people. Paramedics' friend braced pieces of wood from the breach tear and sat at Delgado's side, calmly returning to his posture. Captain Reyes, who had come after the home was emptied, observed the situation. In silent amazement, Morales emerged from behind a SWAT truck and made eye contact with Delgado, acknowledging Buddy's actual skill under tremendous pressure with the smallest bow of respect. As dawn's first light crept over the horizon, pressure outside painted the. Delgado leans lightly against a police cruiser at a riverbank with a soft glow. Pet Buddy's disheveled neck, the dog's eyes, which had previously been terrified, now showed unshakable. "I believe we've seen the fatherly watch commander stealthily approach and put a hand on Delgado's shoulder." "Enough," she said, smiling slightly. "No more probation. This dog has shown that he belongs." At the moment when Delgado experienced feelings of relief, pride, thanks, and in the brief time since the warehouse friend transformed from a famished outlaw to an undisputed hero, the silence of dawn brought a feeling of a Buddy's destiny being realized, with their tail wagging softly against Delgado, as if asserting his proper position. Neither man nor dog had requested this route, but they had discovered it together, and remarkable example of how one act of bravery may set off a series of miracles, as the city is now secure from. They stood on the precipice of the story's conclusion, ready to embrace another menace in Buddy's final test victory. Sunlight bathes the next chapter of unwavering loyalty and shared duty. Officer James Delgado arrived in the police station's lobby early that morning to finish the last of the paperwork for Buddy's. Formally joining the department's K9 program, the transformation from a stray to a renowned police canine was once unimaginable, was now becoming a reality following the hostage rescue, in which a friend carried out a. Under extreme pressure, the skeptics were flawlessly taken out with little ammunition remaining. Even the once outspoken skeptic Detective Morales put aside his misgivings. Kurt nodded and gave Delgado the uncommon compliment. "Good dog. You've got there, Delgado, overnight," as they met him in the corridor. Of Buddy's bravery sparked a fresh round of public awe, and neighbors left thank you notes at the. Some even inquired about making a donation to support Buddy's ongoing training at the station front desk. M. Hawkins observing, "A community fundraising was discreetly created by the groundswell of support to guarantee that any future equipment or medical." The fatherly watch commander, Captain Reyes, supervised these expenses so that they wouldn't put undue burden on Delgado's meager budget. breakthroughs while grinning contentedly and whispering to Delgado, "I always believe." With the formalities concluded, "You have demonstrated to everyone else what you too are capable of." Ms. Balda. Delgado was given a brief contract by a finance worker who had previously peered at budget lines. "Here it is," she muttered almost. Following the hostage, Shy's probationary K-9 agreement was extended to full status. "Save the cities on board." Delgado examined the sentence with a smile tugging at his mouth, but observing that his dog is called K-9 Buddy and the official line regarding immediate allocation of municipal finances, all departmental discussions, and, in a single declaration of acceptance, the jousting and skepticism vanished. "He's yours," Ms. Bao declared. Softly, well, you're his. I suppose Delgado felt that way when he got home that night. With an attitude of assurance, a friend with unusual lightness trotted into the flat as if Mia, the neighbor's daughter who occasionally assisted with tiny jobs, sensed that the important choice had passed, shouted with delight at the news, and Toby stopped by to give Buddy a heartfelt pat on the head. "I suppose we should arrange a..." With a half smile, Delgado acknowledged that the department had arranged official K-9 induction, which Buddy had never handled before joining the force, would be anything but typical. Following a peaceful supper, Delgado thought back on the dog journey, remembering all of the pivotal moments throughout the warehouse standoff. The flip from inexperienced stray to friend who first stepped in, the gradual trust they developed in Delgado's little apartment. Under the direction of Maria Vargas, a star student, the last hostage rescue that secured the dog's position in the city's defense forces, Delgado was astounded to learn that it all started with a single act of impulsive bravery, recalling how hungry and beaten his friend had been and how easy the dog could have run away or overlooked Delgado's situation that evening. But something in Buddy's broken spirit had made him feel sorry for a stranger, and that deed eternally altered both of their lives. Delgado looked over the pictures that I.M. Wong had provided him under the lamp's light. Images of the dog practicing beside the two of them in the station yard, and reports about their frequent achievements, causing tears to well up in his eyes. An unusual emotional outburst for an officer. He looked up to see a friend studying him, accustomed to preparing for hard truths. With his tail wagging from the other side of the room at the first sign of eye contact, Delgado was forced to kneel and pull his friend. He said, "You did this into a gentle embrace, demonstrating that we, regardless of our origins, everyone has a place." In the days that followed, the precinct organized a little ceremony. Similar to a K-9 induction, this quick press conference was hardly an extravagant affair. When Captain Reyes would give a friend an honorary collar patch, despite his humility, Delgado acknowledged it as a opportunity to officially thank Maria Vargas Toby Miss Hawkins, one of the many people who supported Buddy's cause, and the event took place in the station's largest space, and neighbors who thought a stray dog could stand among the city's law enforcement. A surprisingly high number of cops, local council members, and, when Buddy and Delgado entered the fatherly watch, the crowd of community supporters cheered and applauded. Commander Reyes gave a brief introduction regarding Second Chance's lording. Friend as a representation of tenacity and devotion. Morales, standing close to the rear, remained calm, but Delgado could tell that his implicit skepticism had softened into a reluctant. When Rhea placed a tiny honorary K-9 badge on Buddy's recently installed harness, cameras erupted in applause. Delgado patted Buddy's head, while Miss Hang took pictures for her final article in the local newspaper, whispering a sincere "thank you" that was unclear if it was addressed to the dog, the crowd, or the universe as a whole. The dog ears pricked up and looked up at Delgado with unflinching focus as they crossed paths. Rely on a silent acknowledgement of this momentous occasion following Toby and Miss Hawkins gave Delgado his congratulations, while Miss Green, the animal rights activist, grinned from. Miss Barrow reminded everyone across the room that they were no longer skeptical of the training methods. She acknowledged with a courteous handshake that certain investments went beyond the budget lines she had previously protected. Spreadsheets, and the watch commander merely patted them with a fatherly smile. Without using words, Delgado's shoulder expressed her pride as she stood close to the station's entrance. Delgado then glanced down at his friend, who sniffed at them. The dog was just airtail wagging and had no idea what formal badges or ceremonies were. That after risking all to save Delgado, he stood safely next to the person, realized that the true triumph was in the friendship they shared despite all the legalities involved in converting a friend into a recognized canine. Even the most stringent department protocol was unable to fabricate their tail from dusty alleyways too. The transformational power of compassion and trust was shown by the united cooperation, an unyielding determination in the event that Buddy's journey from lost deviates from approved canine. Officer touched your heart, and we want you to continue sharing tales of compassion and hope by subscribing to our channel. More real-life stories showing how tiny deeds of kindness can lead to huge transformations. Like and share this video too. Spread the word that every human and canine life deserves an opportunity to shine. Tell us about a moment when you saw compassion cross the gap between hardship and victory in the comment section below. No matter where we come from, Buddy's brave journey serves as a reminder that faith in one another has the power to change our fates, safeguard our communities, and demonstrate how one act of bravery can have incredible, life-affirming effects.